So guys, we're in for a arms and delts session today. So a quick sort of voiceover running through everything. We started off with a unilateral lateral raise. So first movement here, standing when fatigue's less. And you'll notice as we get into that, we start using movements where you've got sort of a back support, a chest support to brace into it. So the goal here is keeping that chest up, dropping that shoulder down, depressing your traps, and then driving and thinking about driving those knuckles out and wide towards those walls. Slight bend in the elbow, and then driving out and wide. So 2 sets here, one heavier set, that 8 to 10 mark to kick things off, and then moving on to that slightly higher rep work into that 10 to 12. So starting with the weaker side, and then just matching reps on the stronger side following that. Second exercise, we're into a lying lateral raise here. So again, fatigue's a little bit higher now. So we're into a movement which is lying down. We can drive into that bench. We can brace into that movement a little bit more and really focus on not having to worry about stabilizing as much and just solely focus on putting that maximum amount of emphasis onto that medial delt, that side delt here, which is the goal here. So you'll notice there isn't a huge desire here to either retract or protract at the scapula. We just let that shoulder joint move freely. And the goal here, again, is to drive out and wide, using those cuffs so we can take a little bit of sort of joint stress off that wrist and just really think about maximal sort of tension into that medial delt from there. So 2 sets there again, 8 to 10, 10 to 12. Lastly, last sort of medial delt move into a crucifix lateral raise here. Again, that back support to brace into that movement nicely, keeping that chest up and driving up and back. And out. So we're not just driving directly up, we're driving back as well. This is a medial delt exercise. Yes, we get a little bit of sort of posterior delts, that rear delt in, but the majority of this is medial delt in that sort of planar movement that we're working in. So again, the setup on here, one heavier set, 8 to 10, one slightly higher rep set, that 10 to 12 mark again. So you'll notice that across the board, we tend to sort of have one heavy set, one higher rep set, and that's our general sort of consensus is sort of 2 sets for majority of muscle groups, 3 for sort of moving upwards from there on some. You'll notice this movement here, we did do 3 sets, one heavier set, 8 to 10, then 2 higher rep sets at 10 to 12 mark. So the goal here is just focusing on fully extending, fully shortening that tricep and taking it through its full stretch. So stretching up, pausing, and you'll notice that with the majority of these movements, we're looking at spending time at each sort of portion of that range. So that stretch and that contraction, and just really focusing on pausing at each portion and really contracting. So that's the main sort of push down done into a unilateral push down here, and really again focusing on getting that tricep nice and short. So one heavy set here, 8 to 10, one higher rep, 10 to 12. Pausing each portion of that range, you notice we drive back, and when we drive back, we let that arm come backwards a little bit more just to get that tricep even shorter and even more contracted. And you'll notice that the majority of sort of that setup, heavy back off, we just maximally exerting ourselves to that mechanical failure point. And if done correctly, then that's plenty of volume, especially considering that we're hitting this muscle group frequently. So I run through this arm and delt session twice a week at the minute. Obviously with the sort of issues with my right knee at the minute, leg training is pretty difficult. So that frequency of upper body is a little bit higher. As a result, we can get away with a little bit less per session. Into a bicep curl here, I love this movement here because that natural sort of, it naturally puts you in a position where you can let your elbows come up and have shoulder flexion at the top, which we know that top of that movement, when we let that elbow come up and have that shoulder flexion, that allows us to get that bicep fully short and fully contracted, which ultimately allows us to get more growth and more potential for growth after the bicep. 3 sets here, an 8 to 10, 2 sets 10 to 12 following that. So the same setup that we did with triceps here. So we're driving up, really letting those elbows come up, and again having that bench for stability as fatigue is relatively higher, at least a lot higher now than it was at the start of the session. So 1 set 8 to 10, 2 sets 10 to 12, and again pausing at each sort of portion of the range. So that's that movement you just saw. Our palm is open. Here we're moving into a hammer curl with a neutral grip, so getting more into that sort of forearm brachialis. So we're pausing and driving up. So here, 1 set 8 to 10, 1 set 10 to 12, pausing at each sort of portion of that range, focusing on that stretch, and again contracting and really squeezing that contraction and thinking about moving that weight with the target muscle instead of just moving that weight A to B. That's a quick run through of the arm and delt session, guys. And like I said, I run this every week. I run it twice a week. If you're running it a little bit less frequently, I'd add a set onto each exercise as frequency will be lower.